Hey, what's up, you amazing people? And today we'll be talking about the deity of Christ and the existence of God. Let's get straight into it. Really quickly before we start, I think I just should mention why I'm doing this, why I'm making the video. I asked for evidence for the Old Testament affirming that people can be pedophiles, right? And this guy said, I love Christians asking for evidence, right? Kind of claiming that there's no evidence for Jesus Christ being, or Jesus Christ being God, but he loves that we ask for evidence when we cannot show evidence. He then goes on to say, all the proof is just the Bible says so, right? Which is basically just a response to me when I asked him about, the deity of Christ. And he's saying the only way that we can prove that Jesus Christ is God is through the Bible. We're going to get into this in a second, but I think the first thing that we should do as a part of this video is proving the existence of God first. The argument for God that I would like to give is what we call the first cause argument. But really quickly, we have to understand, what is causality? So Google has a great definition, and I think it fits well with the argument, right? But it has two different definitions, right? The first one is the relationship between cause and effect, and the second one is the principle that everything has a cause. I think it'd be best if we went with the second definition, which is the principle that everything has a cause. The reason why is that it's true, right? So here's an example. One day, there's a massive storm, there's lightning, thunder, and all that. And this is in the countryside, right? So there's a bunch of trees around and all that. And the lightning is everywhere, it's going or whatever, right? And the lightning comes down, right, and hits the tree. That example right there is a great example of cause and effect. So here's why it is, right? The cause is lightning struck the tree, right? And the effect of lightning striking a tree is that the tree catches on fire. Okay, so now that we are all familiar on what cause and effect is, let's explain this on how it relates to God. So the first point, everything that exists has a cause, right? We've gone over the example of the lightning striking the tree, right? So everything needs a cause. For the effect to happen, there must have been a cause, right? For example, the tree to have been caught on fire, the lightning must have struck the tree, or someone must have set the tree ablaze, for example, right? Second point, the universe exists, right? So it must have a cause. The universe must have a cause because we understand in the first point that everything has a cause. Therefore, the universe exists, so it must have a cause. Now, point 3, there cannot be an infinite chain of causes, or else it would cause an infinite regress. An infinite regress, philosophically, is impossible, right? Because it would suggest that time is infinite, right? There's never been a first cause for time, right? Meaning that time has always existed, right? Even when nothing else existed. Which means that someone will have to prove somehow that time is, in a sense, necessary. Because for it to have always existed, it means that it has to always have been there. But without a first cause, the chain of events could have never started, and therefore nothing would exist now. This means that the infinite regress is impossible. So because of point 1, point 2, and point 3, this means that there must be a first cause which is uncaused and eternal, right? Because if it is not eternal, right, then again, it would go back to point 3. We'd have an infinite regress, right? And so we can call the first cause God. Now, the first cause must be something that exists necessarily, meaning it cannot fail to exist. It has to exist in all possible worlds, right? And it is outside of time and space. These qualities are more consistent with the theistic understanding of God than a natural cause. The reason why it would have to exist necessarily is because if we're referring to modal realism, it would have to be the first cause for everything. Because for X to begin to exist, it must have been there, meaning it's a necessary being. So we've established that this being is existent in all possible worlds. Let's just quickly prove that it would be omnipotent, and then we can get onto the deity of Christ. So, the first cause is a single, all-powerful being rather than a complex set of forces. Now, it's best to say it's an omnipotent creator because it makes the best sense of the origin of the universe, and because it's simpler. And because it's simpler, we can apply Occam's razor. Occam's razor simply just asserts that the explanations that require the least amount of assumptions are the most likely to be correct. So, in summary, in the first 5 minutes and 30 seconds of this debate, we have proven that there is an omnipotent God. So, let's go ahead and show that Jesus Christ is God. First of all, Jesus Christ claims to be God. I think that's the first point we should cover. Now, in John chapter 8, verse 58, Jesus says, "Before Abraham was, I am." Right? He's claiming that he is God, which references the Old Testament in Exodus chapter 3, verse 14, where it says, "I am who I am," which is the Lord revealing himself to Moses. Now, this was through the burning bush. We understand that this was God at this time. So we understand that Jesus is claiming himself to be God, right? That's the first point we've covered, right? So first, Jesus does claim to be God. Second point, does Jesus perform miracles? In Matthew chapter 4, verse 23 to 24, it says Jesus went through Galilee, teaching in their synagogues, proclaiming the good news of the kingdom, and healing every disease and sickness among the people. News about was spread all over Syria, and people brought him all those who were ill with various diseases, those suffering severe pain, the demon-possessed, those having seizures, and the paralyzed, and he healed them. Again, Jesus heals a man with leprosy. Chapter 8, verse 1 to 3 says, "Then Jesus came down from the mountainside. Large crowds followed him. A man with leprosy came and knelt before him and said, 'Lord, if you are willing, you can make me clean.' Jesus reached out his hand and touched the man. 'I am willing,' he said. 'Be clean!' Immediately he was cleansed of his leprosy." Now, after the crucifixion of Jesus Christ, in John chapter 20, verse 19 to 20, it says, "On the evening of the first day of the first week, when the disciples were together, with the doors locked for fear of the Jewish leaders, Jesus came and stood among them and said, 'Peace be with you.' After he said this, he showed them his hands and side. The disciples were overjoyed when they saw the Lord." Now remember, this shows that Jesus had resurrected after he had been killed, right? Or been crucified. He had came out of his tomb and been resurrected and then ascended after. So in conclusion for the second point, yes, Jesus performs miracles. Now the third and final point, what prophecies does Jesus fulfill? And Isaiah chapter 53 verse 3 to 14 is an example. "He was despised and rejected by mankind, a man of suffering and familiar with pain. Like one from whom people hide their faces, he was despised, and he was held him in low esteem. Surely he took up our pain and bore our suffering, yet we considered him punished by God, stricken by him and afflicted. But he was pierced for our transgressions, he was crushed from our iniquities. The punishment that brought us peace was on him, and by all his wounds we were healed. We are like sheep have gone astray. Each of us has turned to our own way, and the Lord has laid on him the iniquity of us all. He was oppressed and afflicted, yet he did not open his mouth. He was led like a lamb to the slaughter, and as a sheep before its shearers is silent. So he did not open his mouth. By oppression and judgment he was taken away. Yet who of his generation protested? For he was cut off from the land of the living. For the transgressions of many people he was punished. He was assigned a grave with the wicked, and with the rich in his death. Though he had done no violence, nor was any deceit in his mouth, yet it was the Lord's will to crush him, and cause him to suffer. And though the Lord makes his life an offering for sin, he will see his offspring, and prolong his days. And the will of the Lord will prosper in his hand. After he has suffered, he will see the light of life, and be satisfied. By his knowledge, my righteous servant will justify many, and he will bear their iniquities. Therefore, I will give him a proportion among the great. or a portion among the great. And he will divide the spoils with the strong, because he poured out his life unto death, and was numbered with the transgressors. For he bore the sin of many, and made intercessions for the transgressors. This simply just shows that it's a prophecy about Jesus dying for us and holding our transgressions onto himself, even though he was righteous. Lastly, Isaiah chapter 42 verse 1 to 4 says, "Here is my servant whom I uphold, my chosen one in whom I delight. I will put my spirit on him, and he will bring justice to the nations. He will not shout or cry out or raise his voice in the streets. A bruised reed he will not break, and a smouldering wick he will not snuff out. In faithfulness he will bring forth justice, and will not falter or be discouraged till he establishes justice on the earth. In his teaching the islands will put their hope." Simply, what this all means is that Jesus came to bring justice, right? But also to bring peace and prosperity, right? It says in verse 1, "I will put my spirit on him and he will bring justice to the nations," right? This is a prophecy that obviously Jesus was the one to uphold. So first of all, Jesus claimed to be God. Second of all, Jesus performed miracles. Third of all, Jesus fulfilled prophecies. But now, I just want to reference one thing. The verses that I've given are reliable, meaning that the eyewitness accounts of these events are reliable. Now, we understand biographies, autobiographies, things like that to be works of non-fiction, meaning that they are real, right? And it's actually shown that the Bible is a non-fictional book. I'm going to show you some evidence in a second. So I've written like a whole thing on this. I say, the Gospels share numerous features and motifs that we find in ancient biographies. To start off, we can see the Gospels start with opening prologues. We can see that Mark starts with one sentence. An example of where a biography might start with one sentence is Zenoth, the life of Timon. Matthew starts with Jesus' genealogy, such as Nepos, Plutarch, right? Luke has an opening preface explaining the purpose of his gospel, Lucian, Philo, or Lucian. John starts with an extended prologue. An example of this is Lucian again, Isocrates. Michael F. Bird says, "The opening sequence of Mark would suggest that the readers are about to read the life of a sage." Richard A. Burridge says, "The use of the name after the prologue was noted as common features in Beale, such as Agricola." What this simply all just means is that we see numerous features with ancient non-fiction texts as we do with the gospel. So we can say that the gospel is more of a biography than just a fictional text. And we can say that the eyewitness accounts are actually most likely going to be true, right? The reason for this is that we see that many of the apostles and disciples, like, they all died, right? Except for, I'm pretty sure, like, one or two, right? And they died gruesome deaths. I mean, like, I'm pretty sure it was Paul's or St. Peter's cross. They died upside down, and they got crucified upside down because they didn't believe that they should be crucified the way that Jesus was, because they're not worthy, right? One of them was beheaded, one of them was, stabbed, many different types of ways that they have been killed, right? And so if I say, for example, let's say I see a unicorn, right? And then someone comes up to me and says, if you actually saw a unicorn, right? And you claim to see a unicorn, right? I will kill you, right? And if I stand firm in that belief, right, we have good reason to believe that I actually saw a unicorn, because I wouldn't be willing to die for my beliefs if I didn't actually see a unicorn, would I? So it's more logically coherent to say, oh yeah, it's more likely that these eyewitness accounts and testimonies are true, right? Rather than saying, oh yeah, they're all false, they all lied, right? Because you would need a preponderance of evidence just to show that to be the case. Because we have more good reason to believe that they weren't lying than they were. So in summary of the video, right, we have proved that Christians have good reason to believe in the eyewitness testimonies. We have proven that the eyewitness testimonies verify that Jesus is God, and the prophecies also verify this, right? And we have also show numerous accounts that, or numerous reasons why God is real, right? For example, the first cause theory and causality and how that proves an omnipotent God. So we have shown the deity of Christ and the existence of God. But that's it for today's video. This has been a long video, and I know it's been maybe a bit boring for you guys, but I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, make sure to like it and subscribe, and have a great day, you amazing people. That's it from me.